The night holds its breath. In the deepest hours before dawn, a city under siege learns to listen for the silence. For in that crushing quiet, the future is decided. At precisely 00:30 a.m. on the morning of July 7th, 2025, the skies over Kyiv were suffocatingly silent. A tense, heavy blanket of waiting. But that silence was not a promise of peace. It was the pause before the storm. A thin, distant whine, like a malevolent insect, pierced through the darkness. It was a sound that had become a harbinger of death, the signature of Russia's infamous German 2 loitering munitions. The whine grew, multiplied, and then became a chorus. Streaks of flame slashed across the ink-black sky, not with the blinding speed of a missile, but with a slow, deliberate, and terrifying certainty. Mere seconds later, a series of thunderous explosions erupted across the eastern outskirts of the capital. From deep within Russian-controlled airspace, waves of these so-called suicide drones dived toward their targets, tearing through the night with blinding flashes. This was not a blitzkrieg. Russia had just launched a full-scale offensive, a campaign designed not merely to strike, but to exhaust. This was not a classic push, with tanks grinding through mud or infantry columns advancing under fire. Instead, Russia had unleashed a storm of attritional precision weaponry, a symphony of destruction composed of suicide drones, long-range cruise missiles, nimble mobile strike units, and devastating multi-launch rocket systems. In this opening phase, the slow, low-flying German 2 drones took the lead. They are primitive by the standards of modern warfare, but their strength lies not in sophistication, but in numbers. They are cheap, brutally simple to manufacture, and relentlessly numerous. They weren't fast, they weren't smart, but when hundreds are launched in waves from multiple directions at once, even the most advanced, multi-layered AIR defense systems begin to falter. They present a tactical nightmare. Each drone is a low-value target, yet it demands a high-value response. To ignore them is to invite destruction. To engage them is to expend precious, sophisticated interceptor missiles on what is essentially a flying lawnmower engine packed with explosives. Ukraine's layered anti-air network responded with practiced fury. The night was lit by the fiery trails of interceptors climbing to meet the threat. But as soon as the first wave of UAVs was torn from the sky in blossoms of fire, a second wave appeared on the radar screens, and then a third. This was not a war of speed. It was a war of endurance, a brutal calculus of attrition. The German 2s were inflicting not just physical destruction, but immense psychological and logistical strain on the Ukrainian defenders, forcing them to burn through their finite stockpiles of advanced munitions. Simultaneously, as Ukrainian air defense operators were locked in this desperate battle against the swarm, a far more lethal threat was already in motion. From naval platforms in the Black Sea and launch sites on the Crimean Peninsula, volleys of Kaliber cruise missiles were launched in tandem. Their trajectories were locked onto high-value strategic sites in central Kyiv, hardened ammunition depots, encrypted military communication hubs, underground command centers, and the very air defense launch sites that were currently engaged with the drones. To the north, a handful of Iskander ballistic missiles, fired from the territory of Belarus, surged downward on near vertical trajectories. The drone attack was the bait. This was the hammer blow. A three-directional pincer of high-end ordnance was closing around the Ukrainian capital. Within minutes, the skies over northeastern Kyiv were choked with smoke, lit by an inferno, and drowned in the deafening roar of incoming warheads. The strategy was brutally effective. A significant portion of the city's air defense infrastructure, its locations revealed by their engagement of the drones, was temporarily disabled in under 20 minutes. The assault was not limited to Kyiv. As the sun began to hint at its arrival, the focus of the storm shifted east. At precisely 4 a.m., the city of Kharkiv, a bastion of resistance that had endured years of conflict, came under a devastating rocket artillery bombardment, BM-30 Smerch launchers, formidable 300mm multiple rocket systems, positioned just across the border outside Belgorod, opened fire. They did not fire single rockets. They unleashed tightly grouped triple salvos, a torrent of steel and high explosives aimed at fuel depots, critical logistics corridors, and major ammunition warehouses. These weapons are designed for area saturation, capable of obliterating entire trench systems and hardened shelters in a single terrifying volley. They turn acres of earth into a cratered, burning moonscape in seconds. Above this maelstrom, a silent, unseen battle was also being waged. Unarmed Orlan 10. Reconnaissance UAVs patrolled in precise, high-altitude formations, acting as the unblinking eyes of the Russian artillery commanders. Live video feeds were relayed directly to command posts, allowing for surgical fire corrections in real time. Shells were no longer just aimed at grid coordinates. They were walked onto their targets with chilling precision. Camouflaged positions, meticulously hidden from ground-level observation, were struck with ruthless accuracy. Within 40 minutes, the effects were catastrophic. At least 7 distinct Ukrainian logistic zones had been annihilated. Among them was a crucial HIMARS-guided ammunition cache, its Western-supplied munitions cooking off in a chain of secondary explosions that shook the earth for miles. In several sectors, frontline troops found themselves trapped, their supply lines vaporized and their retreat corridors sealed off by a curtain of unrelenting artillery fire. This was the perfection of a logistical decapitation strategy first tested by Russia in early 2025. But this time, it was a synchronized triad of destruction, constant surveillance, overwhelming firepower, and suffocating psychological pressure, executed all at once. By 6 a.m., as dawn broke over a shattered landscape, Russian tactics shifted again, demonstrating a terrifying adaptability. The long-range bombardment gave way to the sudden, phantom-like emergence of small strike teams. Near the contested towns of Borova in the Kharkiv region and Pokrovsk in Donetsk, Russian troops began to probe and assault forward Ukrainian positions. But this was not a conventional mechanized assault. There were no lumbering armored vehicles, no clatter of helicopter gunships. They arrived on motorcycles, on military bicycles, even on lightweight electric dirt bikes that moved with near-silent speed. This minimalist mobility approach had one clear purpose: stealthy insertion, swift sabotage, and rapid withdrawal. Before Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs could even be vectored to their location, each team was a small, self-sufficient unit of destruction. Just 2 to 4 men, carrying compact rifles, underbarrel grenade launchers, and small-scale breaching kits. They were ghosts on the battlefield. They didn't engage in prolonged firefights. They struck with lightning speed at the vulnerable sinews of the front line, supply outposts, forward communication stations, and hastily assembled mini-munitions dumps. To amplify the chaos, loitering micro-drones, small enough to be launched from a backpack, accompanied these raids from the air, attacking soft targets like trucks and generators, and sowing confusion and panic among defenders. The result was a tactical nightmare for Ukraine. Its defenders were now forced to divide their focus across 3 simultaneous and radically different domains of warfare, fending off strategic airstrikes from above, surviving brutal artillery duels from the front, and now hunting down saboteurs operating from within their own rear areas. By 8:30 a.m., the southern coastline ignited. The vital port cities of Odesa and Mykolaiv, Ukraine's gateways to the Black Sea and the world, were targeted next. Russian long-range bombers, flying in the safety of international airspace far above the Black Sea, unleashed volleys of Kh-101 air-launched cruise missiles. These are sophisticated, terrain-hugging weapons designed to fly low, using the curvature of the Earth and the contours of the land to mask their approach, making early detection extremely difficult. Their targets were the arteries of the southern front, strategic fuel reserves, port terminals handling military cargo, hardened command bunkers, and critical railway nodes. Within just 15 minutes, 3 major depots near Odesa's docks were engulfed in pillars of black, greasy smoke that climbed for thousands of feet into the sky. In Mykolaiv, Russian Su-34 fighter bombers, using the chaos as cover, swooped in at low altitude and dropped Kyiv 500 guided bombs, collapsing 2 mobile command centers on the city's outskirts into rubble. By 10 a.m., Ukraine's southern logistics network was crippled, freezing the flow of vital supplies and ammunition toward the embattled Kherson front. At this point, microfractures began appearing across Ukraine's entire line of defense. The relentless, multi-front assault was taking its toll. AIR defense systems, having engaged wave after wave of targets for 10 straight hours, were reporting critically low ammunition levels. Reconnaissance, UAV crews were exhausted, their drones unable to recharge or rotate in time to maintain situational awareness. Compounding the crisis, Russian electronic warfare units intensified their jamming, disrupting the command links for Ukraine's fleet of Bayraktar TB2 drones, causing video feeds to lag, and, in some cases, causing the drones to lose control and crash. And yet, even under this immense pressure, by 11 a.m., Ukraine mounted a defiant, if limited, counterattack near Dobropilya and Borova. It was a stunning display of resilience and tactical ingenuity. Using their own remaining Bayraktar drones, paired with precision-guided Excalibur artillery shells, they turned the tables. A Ukrainian drone operator, flying high above the battlefield, identified Russian mobile ammunition convoys attempting to resupply the minimalist strike teams. Laser designators painted the targets, and from miles away, Ukrainian artillery responded. The laser-guided shells, arcing invisibly through the sky, struck their marks with lethal precision. In a series of swift, targeted strikes, they managed to destroy at least 2 mobile ammunition convoys, annihilate 3 of the motorcycle-borne strike teams, and obliterate 1 armored logistics vehicle. It wasn't enough to turn the tide of the massive offensive, but it was a bloody message. It proved that Ukraine's defense was battered, but far from broken. At exactly 1400 hours, Russia initiated another phase. A new wave of airstrikes was launched, this time on the industrial heartlands of Zaporizhia and Dnipro. This was an attack on Ukraine's future ability to wage war. An hour prior, stealthy Zala reconnaissance drones had scouted the area, identifying critical targets and feeding their exact coordinates to Central Command. Now, Su-34 and Su-35S fighter jets executed precision bombing runs. These strikes were not aimed at frontline positions, but at small arms factories, artillery coordination centers, and vehicle staging areas. Within 45 minutes, 3 command hubs were flattened. A critical industrial sector in the city of Dnipro, responsible for manufacturing vital military components, was reduced to a landscape of smoldering ash and twisted steel. Ukraine's air defenses in the region had already been thinned out, redeployed to reinforce the desperate defense of Kyiv and Odesa, leaving these vital industrial zones virtually exposed. By 17:30 p.m., as evening approached, the skies over Kyiv darkened once more. The suicide drones returned. But this time, they were accompanied by Kaliber ASILs launched nearly simultaneously from Russian frigates in the Black Sea. Russia employed a double-tap timing strategy, a cruel and effective tactic designed to overwhelm and confuse defenders. As Ukrainian short-range interceptors focused on the more numerous, slow-moving drones, the faster, more lethal Kaliber missiles slipped through the gaps in the defensive screen. At least 2 Kalibers broke through and struck a critical SAM ammunition depot near Borispil Airport, the very depot needed to rearm the systems defending the capital. At almost the exact same moment, Ukraine struck back with vicious resolve in the Sumy region, targeting the retreating Russian mobile squads in their light trucks. Small reconnaissance drones directed precise artillery fire that destroyed 3 vehicles and obliterated a temporary ammo stockpile they had established. Even by 2300 hours, nearly 24 hours after the first drone whine was heard, the battlefield had not gone quiet. In both Kharkiv and Odesa, new swarms of suicide drones reappeared. But this time, they were launched in dispersed micro-groups, staggered in 15-minute intervals. It was a strategy of attrition through pure psychological exhaustion, a nerve erosion tactic. Ukrainian air defense crews, many of whom had been at their stations for a full day, were denied any chance of rest, forced to remain on high alert for a threat that could materialize at any moment. Inevitably, with crews exhausted and interceptor stocks dwindling, some drones made it through. In Kharkiv, one slammed into a public market, injuring 33 civilians. In Odesa, another crashed into a seaside parking lot, killing 1 person. By midnight, the day's grim toll had been tallied. Ukraine had lost 9 critical ammunition depots, 6 command centers, and more than 20 radar stations. Over 30 civilians were dead or grievously injured. Russia, too, had paid a price. Ukrainian defenses had successfully shot down at least 70 suicide drones, eliminated 8 of the mobile strike teams, and destroyed several logistic vehicles with counter-artillery fire. It was one of the bloodiest, most technologically advanced, and psychologically draining days of the conflict in 2025. But as the smoke cleared and the sirens fell silent, a larger, more terrifying question loomed. This was not a singular decisive blow. It was a template, a demonstration of a new, relentless strategy. The question was no longer just what they would strike tomorrow, but how a nation could possibly endure a war designed not to break its army in a single battle, but to bleed it, slowly and systematically, to death. This is Goba Military. Subscribe for real-time battlefield updates and strategic insights.